In wars there are moments when silence becomes more powerful than noise, when stillness hides an energy that can break through the mightiest formations, and when patience turns into the deadliest of weapons. The story of how Ukraine waited for a Russian jet formation to arrive and then destroyed them all begins not with rockets flying or jets screaming across the sky, but with an atmosphere of quiet calculation. The skies were dark, filled with the distant hum of Russian engines as their fighters and bombers pressed forward, confident and menacing. On the surface, Ukraine looked passive, almost vulnerable, but behind that silence was a deliberate choice, a strategy carefully crafted to unleash devastation at the precise moment. The exterior of this scenario was a display of Russian confidence. Dozens of sleek aircraft moved together like a steel wave, their wings glinting under sunlight as they cut across the horizon. To anyone watching from the ground, it was an intimidating sight, the kind of formation meant to instill fear and signal dominance. Russian jets like the Su-30, Su-34, and Su-35 roared forward, representing the pride of Moscow's aerial might. The formation was tight, disciplined, and seemingly unstoppable. Yet, this same exterior image that projected strength also concealed a critical vulnerability, for the closer they flew together, the more exposed they were to a single, well-prepared strike. Inside Ukrainian command centers, the atmosphere was entirely different. In dimly lit rooms, radar operators tracked every blip on their screens with intense focus. Conversations were short, clipped, and calm, the kind of language that comes when lives depend on precision. Every soldier knew that timing was everything. They could not afford to waste a single missile, nor could they allow fear to push them into firing too early. The interior of this operation was not about flash or spectacle but about patience, trust in technology, and discipline in the face of overwhelming force. Operators hovered over controls, commanders whispered orders, and every heart inside those bunkers beat to the rhythm of waiting for the exact moment. When the moment came, performance took center stage. Ukraine's air defense unleashed its fury in a calculated storm. Missiles rose into the sky with searing trails, arching upward before locking onto targets. Systems like NASAMS, Patriot batteries, and refurbished S-300s synchronized in devastating harmony. Each missile represented millions of dollars and hours of training, but more than that, each missile carried the promise of protection for cities and civilians below. Russian jets, caught in their own confidence, suddenly found themselves trapped inside an invisible net of destruction. One after another, their engines flared, their wings shattered, and the once proud formation turned into a burning mess scattered across the skies. For the Russian pilots, safety features like flares, chaff, and electronic countermeasures were deployed frantically. Bright streaks of decoys lit up the air, jammers scrambled desperately to confuse missile radars, and evasive maneuvers twisted their formations apart. But the sheer precision of modern air defense rendered these efforts ineffective. Ukraine's missiles were designed to see through deception, to lock onto heat signatures even amidst chaos. The safety features that Russia trusted crumbled in real time as one jet after another succumbed to explosions. Meanwhile, Ukraine's own safety depended on restraint. By waiting until the Russian jets were deep inside their kill zone, they ensured that every strike counted, minimizing the risk of retaliation and preserving their limited but powerful arsenal. What made this encounter truly unique was not just the destruction of metal machines but the destruction of arrogance. Ukraine's unique selling point in this battle was patience. Where Russia tried to overwhelm with noise and numbers, Ukraine chose silence and precision. It was not about matching jet for jet or missile for missile. It was about waiting, about creating the illusion of weakness until that illusion could be turned into a trap. That patience gave Ukraine a psychological advantage, showing not only Russia but the entire world that sheer quantity cannot overcome intelligence and timing. The unique blend of Western technology with Ukrainian resilience and local knowledge became the hidden weapon, one that transformed silence into thunder. The cost of this moment was enormous on both sides. Each missile Ukraine launched carried a heavy price tag, sometimes millions of dollars per shot. Every launch had to be justified not only tactically but strategically, because the stockpiles were not endless. Yet the alternative, the cost of allowing Russian jets to drop bombs on cities, power plants, and civilians, was far greater. By investing these expensive weapons in this one devastating ambush, Ukraine bought security for its people, at least for that night. For Russia, however, the price was catastrophic. The loss of fighter jets meant the loss of pilots, training, and equipment worth tens of millions per plane. The financial cost was immense, but the symbolic cost was even greater. To lose an entire formation to an enemy they believed inferior was a humiliation that cut deeper than any material loss. As the smoke cleared and silence once again returned to the skies, the conclusion was undeniable. Ukraine had not only defended its airspace but had sent a message written in fire across the horizon. Brute force had failed, and clever patience had triumphed. For the soldiers in the bunkers, there was relief, exhaustion, and pride. For the Russian forces, there was shock, disbelief, and the bitter taste of defeat. And for the world watching from afar, it was a reminder that modern war is not won solely by having the most machines or the loudest engines, but by knowing how and when to strike. The story did not end in that single night. The lessons of this encounter rippled outward. Ukraine's people, hearing about the destruction of Russian jets, felt a surge of morale. Communities once terrorized by bombings believed once more in the ability of their defenders. The destruction of the formation also forced Russia to reconsider its tactics. No longer could they fly so confidently into Ukrainian skies without expecting hidden traps. Their formations became looser, their attacks more cautious, and their pilots more hesitant. The psychological impact of this single encounter extended far beyond the battlefield itself. Inside Ukraine's defense infrastructure, the success reinforced the importance of integrating Western technology with local tactics. Commanders studied the battle, analyzing how timing, radar coordination, and missile deployment had worked so flawlessly. They understood that such victories could not be wasted or repeated carelessly. Every successful strike had to be balanced with the reality of limited resources. Yet they also knew that they had proved a point. Ukraine could destroy not just a plane here or there, but entire formations if the conditions were right. The destruction of the Russian jet formation also sparked discussions about the evolution of warfare. Military analysts across the world dissected the battle, calling it an example of asymmetric strategy at its finest. Ukraine had shown that smaller forces, armed with intelligence and discipline, could neutralize larger ones. The battle became a case study in how nations facing stronger adversaries could tilt the balance by choosing not to fight on the enemy's terms. Where Russia had expected a head-to-head contest of firepower, Ukraine had offered them silence, patience, and then sudden devastation. For the Russian military, the aftermath was filled with questions and doubt. How could their advanced jets, equipped with radar jammers and countermeasures, fall so quickly? How could pilots trained for years be lost in minutes? The answers pointed not to technical flaws but to strategic misjudgments. Overconfidence had blinded them, leading them into a trap that could have been avoided with caution. Their safety features had been designed for quick engagements, not for coordinated and disciplined ambushes. The battle forced Russia to rethink not just its tactics in Ukraine but its entire understanding of air superiority. Economically, the destruction weighed heavily. The loss of jets meant the loss of billions of rubles in investment. Pilots, often considered among the most valuable assets in any air force, could not be easily replaced. The Russian economy, already strained by war, sanctions, and internal challenges, now carried the burden of rebuilding what had been destroyed in one night of Ukrainian patience. For Ukraine, however, the victory also came with responsibilities. Success bred expectations, and the world looked to see if they could replicate such feats again. Each new Russian sortie became a test, each radar blip another chance to prove that this was not a one-time triumph. The challenge was immense, for Russia would adapt, change formations, and deploy different strategies. Yet the core lesson, that patience can dismantle power, remained unchanged. As months passed, stories of that night circulated not only in military briefings but also in homes, cafes, and schools across Ukraine. Children repeated tales of how their defenders had waited silently and then struck with thunder. Families who had once cowered in fear during air raids found comfort in knowing that the skies were not entirely Russia's domain. The symbolic weight of the victory reached deep into the national consciousness, strengthening unity and resilience. The war continued, brutal and relentless, but this chapter became a symbol of hope. It proved that even against overwhelming odds, even against an enemy with more resources, victories were possible through strategy and resolve. The destroyed Russian formation became more than a tactical win, it became a metaphor for the larger struggle. Just as patience and intelligence could dismantle jets in the sky, so too could they dismantle the assumptions of invincibility that Russia carried into Ukraine. The final reflection of this story is that wars are not merely contests of steel and fire. They are contests of will, of discipline, of knowing when to act and when to wait. Ukraine's choice to wait until the Russian jets were deep inside their kill zone was not just a military tactic, it was a philosophy. It showed that sometimes, the most powerful move is no move at all until the right moment comes. And when that moment comes, the results can echo far beyond the battlefield, shaping morale, strategy, and the very narrative of the war itself. The skies that night bore witness to the collapse of arrogance and the triumph of patience. The Russian formation that had entered confidently never returned. What remained was smoke, wreckage, and a memory etched into the minds of all who watched. Ukraine had waited, Ukraine had struck, and Ukraine had destroyed them all.